This is our first tester program for hopefully sharing our Prosper Public Library programs for the world to see. This is a teen book board meeting. We usually have them on Mondays at 6:30 p.m. Behind me are the teen book board members. Say hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi. On the count of three, 1, 2, 3.
Hi.
Wonderful. We are here with our guest speaker Sarah Mars of Sinish Snark and Laney Gossip, and I don't know if there are any more, but please feel free to share that. We have some great questions for her in regards to diversity in the media. Our Teen Book Board ongoing topic has been diversity in the media and in children's literature because it has been absolutely dismal, and recently the topic has been very hot, and even the Oscars last night had a lot of great stuff. And I can't wait to have Sarah's insights, and I can't wait for her to educate all the kids behind me about how important it is for there to be diversity in the media in order to better their lives. Okay, go ahead, Sarah, take over.
You saw the Fantastic Four teaser, right?
Yes.
So you know how they made Johnny black and that he's now not biologically related to Sue anymore?
Mm-hmm.
My question is, why do that? You can easily change the race of the characters, but keep the backstory the same. Why make one black and one white, effectively changing their history instead of keeping them both white or making them both black so that their history and backstory remain similar?
I think Josh Trank kind of answered a question about, well, why is he black and Kate Mara is white? And he's like, well, he's adopted. So that may or may not actually even really come up in the movie. I honestly don't think that you have to mention it at all. I think people are pretty smart. If you show a multiracial sibling situation, they're just going to be like, oh, it's like a blended family or it's a multiracial family. Like, they're just going to make that leap on their own, and you don't have to account for it. So I won't be surprised at all if the movie doesn't directly address that. I'm not sure there's ever going to be like a big conversation about, hey, he was adopted. Like, that might not really come up. It might not really matter. In terms of race bending a character, in terms of saying we're going to cast a black Peter Parker, which might be on the table, it doesn't matter. Nothing about the backstory has to change. Not a lick has to change. And if it's really upsetting you, if the backstory stays the same and it super upsets you that Peter Parker looks different, that's a bigger problem than comic book movies. I do get it if they're like, oh, we're going to do Peter Parker and here's a whole new backstory, but you could have a black Peter Parker and change zero about his backstory. Nothing about that has to change. Literally, he can still grow up in Queens, the whole kit and caboodle can stay the same, and it's just, this is the guy who's playing him now. So it doesn't, I would understand that if somebody was like, oh, we have to do this huge revision, but most of the time you don't, because 98% of the time it doesn't matter. The other 2% are historical figures and that very rare character where their gender or their religion or their ethnicity actually does impact their story. But most of the time it just has nothing to do with anything. It's just that the status quo is straight white male, and you can plug a lot of stuff into that isn't going to change anything about biographical data or history or characterization. You're just saying, hey, here's this talented actor who happens to not be white. He's going to play this character now, but he's super talented, so.
Hello, I'm Isaiah, and my question is, what is your response to the outrage of some people due to Star Wars Episode 7, I believe, having a black clone?
There's a difference between fandom and the general audience.
Mm-hmm.
People who have read the novelizations, the graphic novels, have watched the cartoons, have picked up the data that comes in, the canon that comes in from these other sources, will have more background on that stuff. But to the general audience, to most of the people who are going to see the movie, all they know about stormtroopers is that there's a bunch of them and they're the bad guys. They're telling us this is a whole new corner of the galaxy. Why does everything have to look exactly like it looks in Middle America? It doesn't. We were here like the heroes were Han Solo, they were Luke Skywalker, they looked a certain way, and now here's this new hero and he doesn't look like that, and that's no longer me, and I have a harder time identifying with that. But that's where it starts crossing into that issue of like, this isn't really about the movie anymore, this is more about like you and your stuff. But I think if you're doing your job, if the writers and the directors and the actors are doing their job and they're doing a good job selling the character, ultimately it won't matter. People will get on board. And the few people who are just screaming and yelling and they can't be that way, it's like, you've probably got bigger problems than who's playing a stormtrooper. You maybe need to see someone and talk about that and work through some things. When Disney decided to do this, they actually had a big Star Wars summit, and they sat down and they talked about what counts and what doesn't count, and they threw a bunch of stuff out. And so there's some things that no longer, like stormtroopers being clones, no, that's out. They're not clones. They're basically just army grunts. And so now that they've established that, you can have anybody be anything because you're not bound by this narrow definition that was just George Lucas being lazy.
Hi, my name's Annabelle.
Mm-hmm.
So my question was, what is your take on trans characters in the media? And, for example, Orange is the New Black and Transparent. Is this, the beginning of a new movement? No.
I love that trans actors are getting shots at legitimate jobs. It will be great when they can play characters where being trans isn't even part of the deal. That'll be that's when you know you've got there, when it just really has nothing, it doesn't even matter, when it's just Laverne Cox is just playing a smart woman. Like, that's all that matters. I get a little bit troubled sometimes because it seems like we're still in a place where kind of presented as a burden almost, like Transparent. A lot of the subtext of that show is how difficult it is to have a trans person in your family. We talk about it not as a burden, but just as a thing. Just as like, hey, my brother cut his hair. It's like, oh, yeah, well, that's happening, but she's my sister, and it'll be fine. So we still have to normalize it, but it's also happening really fast. I mean, just from when I was a kid in the 90s to now, the huge change that has taken place is incredible. I mean, I remember when people wouldn't talk about AIDS, when there was just terror about that. And now it's like, unfortunately, maybe we do need to be talking about it again, but just what has normalized over 20 years is incredible. There just has to be a little bit more acknowledgement of what people go through, what they deal with. They are standing up in a time when it's not easy to stand up, and they're letting themselves be different in a time when it's not easy to be different, but they're making it better or doing those things.
All right. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
How can a label be introduced into a movie or a TV plot without tokenizing and outright pointing out a difference?
Well, The Walking Dead actually just did this last night. The thing is, you just don't do it. Just don't introduce a character that way. You just introduce them like a human, like you introduce anyone else in the show or the book or the movie. What they did on The Walking Dead last night, spoilers, is we met a character named Aaron, and then we met his boyfriend, and it was just like, oh, he has a boyfriend, and nobody cared. And it was never like a big deal. It was just, oh, that's just them together, and then, all right, let's keep going and try not to be eaten. So you just treat it like you treat anything else. Somebody wrote an essay about, is Hermione black? And like sort of looking through Harry Potter for clues of her ethnicity, and it's like, she could be, because there's nothing really definitive anyway. Like, you could make a really good case that she is, or that she's biracial, and that's great. She happened to be played by a white actress in the first set of movies, but I'm sure they're going to get rebooted. And could you reimagine her in a different way down the road? Sure, of course, because nothing about her background has to change. You can just introduce her and say, now she's being played by this person.
Okay. Well, my name is Christina, and my question is, if Katniss and Tris are both leading these action-packed movies, such as Hunger Games and Divergent, doesn't it count that they are part of a woman's action stars with Angelina and Scarlett?
When Jennifer Lawrence can open a movie that isn't X-Men or Hunger Games, or when Shailene Woodley can open a movie that isn't Divergent, yes.
So you're saying that it's not a franchise, but it's not carried by a franchise?
Right, like Scarlett Johansson didn't get there until Lucy. You know, like she had 3 Marvel movies behind her, and she'd been in acting for half her life or whatever, and then she had that movie that was a big hit with no promotion. The only thing selling it was her name, and then it was a big hit, and it's like, oh, people will go see Scarlett Johansson do that. So if Jennifer Lawrence sells a movie where she can do that outside of those pre-existing franchises, great. She would be one of those, and she probably can. I think people would go see her do that. I don't know about Shailene Woodley. She's still pretty new. It's just as hard for the boy stars to break out these days as it is for the women. I mean, Chris Hemsworth just keeps face planting over and over again. They keep trying to make him a star, and it's not working outside of Thor. But Felicity Jones just got a big part in Star Wars that may or may not be Princess Leia. So that'll be like a chance. I don't know that she has action star written all over her, but she'll have a shot to like go on and become that person if she's interested in it.
When there was a movie with Hinduism in it that was mainstream in America, was it Monsoon Wedding, I think?
Oh yeah, Mira Nair's movies.
Yeah, within the plot of the film, a different religion other than Christianity happens, or Judaism happens to be.
Oh, everybody's afraid of that. I don't know that you're going to see that anytime soon.
And then there's a Life of Pi. And then
I mean, yeah, Life of Pi or Slumdog Millionaire, where there was a whole subplot about the conflict between the Hindus and Muslims in India that I think a lot of just whoosh over the American audience's head. But nobody wants to touch religion with a 10-foot pole. Like, you will get into sexuality, you will get into race, you'll get into class, you'll get into all of it before you'll get into religion. Nobody wants to go there. Sometimes you get it a little bit more in the foreign market, but again, like, not really, because it's also not as big of a deal in some of the other markets as it is here. China, which is the biggest, fastest growing box office market, they're an atheist country. Like, they don't have a national religion. They don't have that. So they're not making movies about that yet. Maybe they will. But right now, that's not really happening. And if you want to sell a movie to China because they only release like 37 foreign films a year, that's not going to make hay with their government. Like, you have to meet certain standards. Like, you're going to have to leave that out. It would be nice if we had a little bit more, just because I think that's movies, books, TV shows, music, cultural artifacts like that are a great way to open people up to the differences and to make them appreciate, like, oh, I don't have to agree with it, I don't have to believe it, but I can appreciate it and I can respect it and I can leave it alone and just like let people have that because it's not hurting me or taking away from me in any way. And as long as you're insulating them in the idea that you are the most precious thing, they're going to feel threatened by anything different. So I wish there'd be a little bit more proactive about approaching religion, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
We were talking about action and women being in action movies, and I was wondering about, how women have been portrayed in action movies and are often sexualized as, in different ways, and it's not, an equal split.
It's getting better, though. The superhero movies are making a real point of putting equal pressure on the men to look a certain way. I read something that was like gym membership among men is up like 700% in the last 5 or 6 years because they're trying to keep up with that Captain America physique. So it's not like it's getting better for us, but it's getting worse for them, which is kind of perversely enjoyable. You have a movement in comic books. I think it'll start probably there first. Like Batgirl's getting redone, and she has a new costume, and it's function before form. It's not sexy, and it's very practical. Captain Marvel is another one that's, she's not particularly, she just wears a suit like the others. So it's getting better there, which Captain Marvel's coming to the big screen. Of course, they're going to cast a beautiful actress to play her because, like, that's what they do. But her costume is up to here, and it's big boots, and it's with the gloves. It's a full body thing, so she's going to look like she's in a Kevlar suit, kind of like Captain America. I don't expect her outfit to be much different than his in terms of what it looks like. And so that's kind of a step where you have Black Widow. It's hard with Scarlett Johansson because she's so pretty that everything looks sexy, but it's not ridiculous. And then Captain Marvel will be even more buttoned up. And Lady Sif has looked great. And Wonder Woman is Not terrible. Not terrible. It's not as great in motion as it is in the still photos, but she looks kind of like Xena. And it's not, the lady who plays her is not like ridiculously built, so it's not crazy TNA. So I think it gets better. It'll be nice when you can have a female action star where her looks don't really matter, which was one of the good things about Lucy. We still have to deal with the fact that what Hollywood wants to put forth as the standard of beauty is a really narrow, very narrow line of like, this is what's acceptable, what's in just this little space. And they're doing okay by what's fitting in here, but there's all this out here that it could do a lot better by all of us is by knocking off the digital beauty work. They do a thing now, every movie you see is photoshopped. Like, you haven't seen Jennifer Aniston's actual face in 15 years. And they do it to the men, they do it to the women, they erase every bulge, line, whatever, they just take it away, and you're looking at an absolute perfect rendering of a person that nobody actually looks like that. And I wish they would knock that off. So there's no reason to do it.
Live action CGI photoshopping.
Yeah, there's a couple of FX firms that do it exclusively. It's very, very hush-hush. People go in under the dead of night so they won't be seen having it done. Ironically, one of the firms is the same people who do the Skinny Steve effect for the Marvel movies to make Skinny Steve Rogers. That's where the technology grew out of. So we can thank Marvel for this. But every movie does it, every actor and actress, even if they don't want it done, it gets done. Just to polish everything up, make everything look nice and pretty. So if they just knocked that off, if they just let us have more actresses with lines in their face and more people with slightly, like, okay, his abs are there, but they're not rock hard defined, like, who cares? And, oh my God, if I just worked out, I could get this magazine and Jennifer Aniston will tell me how to get her body. Jennifer Aniston doesn't have Jennifer Aniston's body. Like, that famous striptease scene in We're the Millers was her face on a 25-year-old professional stripper's body. So she doesn't even look like that. And that's fine because she's 46 and she looks great for 46. But that's more than like costumes and things. That's the thing that needs to be knocked off. That's what I think is doing the most damage, is setting this unrealistic expectation of you could ever retain that. You can't. No one can attain that. Jennifer Aniston's only job in the world is to be beautiful, and she can't attain that. So.
And I was also wondering about in action movies with women as star roles, about romance in it, because I feel like romance is, you see it more than, you know, I don't know, I'm trying to think of some very manly action movies, but I think, you know, you get the idea. Just Terminator. So they, you know, they have very manly roles. And there's no.
It's in the formula. It's like the number 3 thing in the formula is love plot. I really liked Captain America: The Winter Soldier for not having a romantic storyline. That was wonderful. Mm-hmm. And more of them should do that, because most of the time, who cares? Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a pressure on female stars in particular to be portrayed in that way. Like, if it's a woman carrying the film, she has to be defined as a wife or a mother. Like in Gravity, what did Sandra Bullock's character losing a kid have to do with anything that was happening in the movie? Who cared? It didn't matter. It was just like anecdotal evidence, but they had to tell the audience, no, but she had a family. It just all went to shit. But it's like, it doesn't matter, though, because she's in space and she's about to die, and that's all that matters. But they had to define her as a mother.
Otherwise, she would have been some spinster floating.
Otherwise, she just would have been like a really smart woman who dedicated her life to science and research.
Who would care if she died if she didn't?
Which a lot of people do. So they'll add that in. Like, you have to have those signifiers of she's a wife, she's a girlfriend, she's a mother. You know, they'll have to interject those storylines, and oftentimes they do end up defining women, even when they're big, strong women. They end up defining them by the men. I mean, Katniss Everdeen being caught between Peeta and Gale, the worst choice in the history of choices.
Yeah.
Seriously.
It's the happy ending for me. Like, I gave up on the Hunger Games when it was like, oh, she's gonna run off with Peeta. I was like, really? Because ideally she just like lives in the woods for the rest of her life, just by herself. Winter Soldier didn't have a love story. Lucy didn't have a love story. So they're starting to kind of figure out, like, we can not have that all of the time. And then the more people kind of buy into just not having it, it'll start to fade out of formula a little bit.
The Winter Soldier had the Bucky Barnes and Captain America love story, a little romantic.
Well, if you actually break down that screenplay in terms of the traditional mechanics of writing, if you actually take that screenplay and break it down, Sam Wilson filled the role of the love interest. He had the meet cute. He was the one who would do anything possible to stay around the hero, and he was the one who needed to be rescued in the end. It really doesn't help when you have a woman doing something and they feel like they need to stop and talk about her relationship status or her kids or whatever. It's like, that doesn't, it doesn't accomplish anything. But it actually, like, I can tell you from market research, if you see a commercial, people will always be wearing a wedding ring because people just trust married people more.
Wow, I didn't know that.
That's the kind of stuff we like to hear. Keep those things in. I have a question for you. Okay, so is it racial preference in Hollywood that keeps it whitewashed, or is it that it's a clique that's just remained white, mostly due to lack of interaction with non-whites? So is it exclusionary or is it exclusive?
It's mostly exclusive. I mean, there have been and are some pretty horrible people making movies. So there's a level of, there's just some dumb people. But for the most part, it's just, by and large, the people who make movies are white men. Almost overwhelming. Robert Downey Jr.'s wife was actually a really good producer before she married him, but she couldn't get a movie made until she hooked up with the most famous man in the world, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, she can make a movie. Nothing about her. I said she'd make this about her at some point. Nothing about her talent, her ability, her capability changed, but changing her last name opened a bunch of doors. Now they're kind of faced with this problem of, well, we've kind of run Peter Parker into the ground. How do we refresh the character? And the easy answer is just make him not white.
So it's not that they're starting to face, like in Broad City, when she said that everyone's going to end up being caramel.
Yeah. Yeah.
The exact quote that she said in Broad City. That they're coming face to face with the fact that we're all blending and we're becoming multi.
Yeah, and they're starting to see where people are doing more diverse projects. They're starting to see significant rewards. Fox, the television station, sat down a few years ago and actually did a broad study and decided that there was more money in being diverse than in not being diverse. So they greenlit a bunch of projects and they did blind casting. And so you end up with these very diverse casts on Sleepy Hollow, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and some of the other Fox stuff. And they are doing better than almost, except for CBS, which is just old people falling asleep at night, they're doing better than all the other networks. Mm-hmm. Attracting a broad audience used to be telling the most bland jokes, offending no one. Now it's just representing everyone.
I was wondering if you could enlighten the kids, the students, about that recent article I think that you also wrote about that I read on Jezebel regarding the nominations that they were making and shutting out Selma, and the I guess the hypocrisy, or at least how it was conflicting her logic and reasoning.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, the disconnect with Selma is they're like, it's a big snub, but then everybody's there in the aisles weeping and dancing with the song and like cheering when they win their one Oscars. So who wasn't nominating that movie? Because everybody in the room seemed really thrilled that it was there. But yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of an actual hiccup in Selma's process. part of getting an Oscar nomination is sending out screeners where people can not go to the theater and just watch your movie at home. They didn't get theirs out in time, so there was a bit of a problem getting people to see the movie. But there was also just an assumption of it wasn't going to be very good because it was a first-time director who didn't have a filmmaking background, and oh yeah, she's a black woman, so they didn't give Ava DuVernay the benefit of the doubt, where Clint Eastwood, who slept his way through American Sniper, got the benefit of the doubt. And that's the problem. There's the director's branch that does the nominating is 97% white men, really depressingly, overwhelmingly white, and they are an old boys club. The Directors Guild, which makes up that branch of the Oscars, is a pretty disgusting group. They're very petty. They're very prone to politicking.
Are we just waiting for them to die? Are they, when they died, someone else gets a seat? Is that what's going on?
Kind of. They will probably be put under a huge amount of pressure to open their ranks a little bit, and get a little bit like Ang Lee is not going to cut it anymore. You're going to need to go a little bit further than Ang Lee. But it is a little bit like you're just.
Is the diversity?
It's like Ang Lee and a couple of Japanese directors and Spike Lee, and like that's it. And then the rest is just white guys. So it's kind of frustrating, and they're not all terrible. Like, I don't want to paint the whole branch, but in terms of who nominates an Oscar, it's just that branch. Directors nominate directors, and they are known to be one of the worst of the old boys clubs. And they really resent the implication that they're not open, but they're not, because it's just, who are they golfing with? Like, they all golf with each other and only each other. None of them are going to invite Ava DuVernay out to lunch to give her advice, to mentor her, to show her the ropes, to help her get her next project off the ground. That's why I'm so glad she met Oprah, because Oprah can get some stuff done for her. But there's really, if you are a white guy in film school, you are going to have mentors coming out the wazoo. They will be jumping on you to give you internships and get you a PA job and help you get your feet under you. It's not the same when you're coming in from a different direction. It's just not. Like, I've been through those programs, and there's just not the same level of mentorship. If you are a young woman who wants to be a director, there aren't many people to help you. And unfortunately, one of the more prominent female directors is not interested in helping other female directors.
That's it for someone to mentor.
Worked very hard for a very long time to get anywhere, and now that she's there, I don't think she fears competition. It's just nobody helped her, so why should she help anyone? Women in Film is doing a really great campaign called Hire Her, where they're promoting, and not just for directors, but for cinematographers, for editors, where they're promoting female interns. Disney has a great program for internship to get started. But
Walt Disney, he was, I don't know how a different way of putting this, a vile racist, right? Was he a vile racist who helped fund the KKK?
Yeah. That's just
they're all like, what? They don't know. Do you think you could give them a little background on that? Because they're all a little shocked.
And the funding thing is that might be the apocryphal. Disney, like, he's the product of his era. His attitudes were not unusual for dudes growing up in the 20s and 30s. Let's just put it that way. He was very much of that era. Fortunately, the company that bears his name is one of the more progressive groups in Hollywood. They were one of the first to offer equal life insurance and health insurance for same-sex partners. They have a lot of great outreach programs for kids from inner city and urban areas where it's like, let's get these kids involved in filmmaking. They do a lot of great scholarship stuff. So they're actually, as a company, his legacy is much better than perhaps he deserves.
Is that Joe Eisner? Is that why?
And Roy Disney, his nephew. They're working on a new one. I want to say it's called Moana. And it's called Moana, I think. And it's Taika Waititi, the New Zealand director, is making it. And it's about a Maori. She's an actual Maori princess, like a tribal princess.
In the Pacific Islands.
They've actually put So like even for the Tiana thing, they've actually done the research and put in the effort to find an actual native mythos that they can build off of, because they just sort of slapped Tiana together. Like, oh, this will do. And it's like, it's not really, it's kind of not the same though. When there was so much they could have done with like Africa, like they could have been like, we're gonna tell a story about an African princess, because there were and are African princesses.
Yeah.
And they were just like, nah, let's just do this frog story in New Orleans. That'll be fine. No one will notice. It's like, no, they totally noticed. That's like the people who are flipping out about Jason Momoa playing Aquaman.
What? There are people doing that?
Oh yeah, they're losing their stuff over a Polynesian Aquaman, and it's like, Atlantis isn't real. That's not a real place. There's no such thing as an Atlantean.
They're like, Atlanteans are white. Is that what they're saying?
Well, there's an old adage that kind of goes with girls don't buy action figures, that people will only go see stories where white men are the heroes, which is why you end up with an Exodus story where Christian Bale is Moses. And Ramses, the Egyptian pharaoh, is an Australian.
Yep.
And so I think in those, at that level, maybe they care, but it's people who actually make the movies. The attitude I've seen from producers is we aren't interested in holding those people's hands, that they are willing to take the hit. J.J. Abrams ran right at the people who were upset about John Boyega playing the hero in Episode 7. Right when that first trailer broke out and the first image is the new hero and it's a black guy, he was like, yep, deal with it. That's happening. And he has not backed down. He's just been right at it because he has no interest in holding those people's hands. He's not catering to that crowd. He wants a good actor, which John Boyega is, portraying his hero in his story. And anyone who has a problem with that, no one's got time for it. So among the filmmakers, I think that's largely the attitude, is we just want to get the talent, we want to get the good people, and make the best movie possible. Maybe at the higher level, there's some like, they're not going to go see it because it's not a white guy, but when Episode 7 opens to $250 million and it makes 1.7 or 8 billion, whatever it's going to do, and Disney just has all of the money in the world, everyone's going to be like, oh, that doesn't matter. It's something people care about, and it's a good story. It doesn't matter who stars in it.
Okay. I'm halfway through Dear White People, and I am bored out of my mind. I am. And also when I watched American History X, and we have a diverse group with us right now, I was like rolling my eyes because being black and Puerto Rican, it was just like, there's racism. Yes. Since I could conceive that there were races, and I was not one of the top tier ones that tend to have better access to things, this movie is boring me. It is not teaching me anything new. I'm not hearing any new things, like when the girl asks her, is your hair weaved? You know, like that, honestly, when you're not white, this is just stuff that happens. So when I'm watching this movie go down and all these other like racially enlightening movies, I'm bored half to death. And I'm wondering if these movies are even made for us or me, or
I would say
who is it made for?
Not. I don't want to put words in Justin Simeon's mouth. The guy who wrote and directed Dear White People, he might have a different attitude. But definitely in the case of American History X, and in the case of A Time to Kill, or anything like that, totally made by white people for white people, to make white people feel better about themselves. It's either because they're being cast as the savior, or it's because they're looking at someone as vile as a neo-Nazi skinhead and going, I'm not that guy, so I'm
not that racist on a scale from racism.
It's like, well, if that's what racist looks like, that's not me. Which is where Selma was so important, was that it was about the black gaze. It was about the black experience from the point of view of the black gaze. And the big kerfuffle that erupted over it was not the liberties taken with Martin Luther King's story, which they took artistic license. Like, there were some things that were shifted around and changed to make the movie more dramatic. The big kerfuffle was that Lyndon B. Johnson, the president, wasn't the savior. He wasn't the hero who rode in to rescue. He was the reluctant accomplice who kind of had to be forced into doing this. And people lost their minds. The thing about Selma was the uniqueness of that point of view, because we don't see it a lot. We don't. Even 12 Years a Slave was kind of made for, look at this history, own this history, you people over there who try to ignore it. It really wasn't about Solomon Northrop's experience as just him. It was really that larger stage of, we're going to use the story to kind of bang you over the head with what happened back then.
If there's any conclusive things that you'd like to say to our students here, first I would like to thank you so much because it was great chatting with you, but if there's anything that maybe to light a fire under them in terms of the seriousness of trying to make diversity a part of the media and how it'll affect their lives, we would love to hear your insight on that.
Well, it starts with representation. I mean, it's very easy to just, especially these days, to just put on the headphones and look right here and isolate yourself and insulate yourself and only the things that you want to deal with. A lot of entertainment now is built to the custom on-demand experience, so if you don't want to see it, you don't have to see it. And the flip side of that coin, though, is that technology has never been more in favor of the creator. So if you want to write a comic book, make a movie, write a song, that technology is there. It's doable. And it's not terribly expensive. It's way easier than I was. So if you see it and you want to change it, you're going to have to do it yourself. I mean, to an extent, we are kind of waiting for these gatekeepers to just, I don't want to say die, but we're just waiting for them to go away and not be the gatekeepers anymore and to give us some new and slightly better gatekeepers. But one way that that happens is by taking ownership of what you can do yourself. You know, it's, if you see a problem that you want to address, if you think, I like this, but it could be better if it was that, we'll make it that, and find a way to put that into the world and give people that option. Because no one's going to hand it to anybody. Like, we're going to just have to kind of make it happen by saying that we're here. People deserve to be shown for the people that they are. They deserve respect, compassion, and equality, because that's what people deserve. That's just like the basic building blocks of what people deserve, are respect, compassion, and equality. And the only way to get there is by making things that show people in that full light. So I would say if you really want to make it change, you're going to have to make it change yourself. But the technology is there, and the industry is shifting to that perspective. The industry is, people are looking for the people who will take the initiative to make their own comic book, write their own graphic novel, make their own short film, and put it out there. You have platforms. You know, there's more platforms than ever to get content out. So I would just say, do it yourself. Don't wait. And if you want to change it, if you want better female action heroes, write a better female action hero. That's really all it takes.
Anyone have any questions? Any last questions? Or all set?
Where is the black cat?
Where's the cat? Is the question.
She stormed off under the sofa in a pack because I wouldn't pay attention to her.
Well, I'm going to conclude right now. I want to say thank you so much to Sarah Mars for doing this. We had to reschedule, I think, 2 or 3 different times twice because of snowstorms. The kids finally got their cupcakes. And please sign up take a look at our blog at prosserteens.wordpress.com, where I'm going to be sharing this live broadcast. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Everyone can say thank you. Bye.
Bye.